and speaks to me. And we're in chapter 8 of the book of John, and we're going to be reading a very familiar message or a story here about a woman that was found to be in sin. There was no doubt about it. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. There was no questioning. There was no, well, I think it is, I think it's not, all these type of things. There was nothing like that in any way, shape, or form. She was absolutely caught in the sin of adultery. And the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious men of that time who were constantly following Jesus and were constantly trying to find some type of fault and find something to trip him up on, they brought her to him. And they were throwing up and they said, you know, the law says this. The law of Moses says this is what we have to do. Because we are the self-righteous. They didn't say that, but basically they should have. We are the keepers of the law. We're the ones, look at us. And we found this, and now Jesus, you're going to have to deal with it. And the law says this is what you have to do, and we want to see you follow up on this. But Jesus had another plan. He could have said, all right, guys, get you a rock, and let's just bash your brains out right here, because this is what the law says to do. But he didn't respond in that way because, you know, the things that, one thing that I guess the Lord has given me, this saying, the Lord spoke to me one day about 5-6 years ago, and He put these words in my mind about God is not concerned with your past, but your future. God is not hung up on your past, but He's concerned about the future. And Jesus could have been caught up in this woman's past and her transgressions, and He could have followed along, but you know what? He was looking ahead to her future and a brand new start. Now, there's many people today that are so caught up and wrapped up and hung up in their past. Many times folks will say, Pastor, you just don't know what all I've done. I don't care what you've done. They're so hung up on the things that have occurred, you know, 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 30 years ago, this happened. And I'm just kidding. I said, whoa. We're not going to dwell in the past. We're going to look to the future. And Jesus gave this example today of a brand new start. And we're going to read the scripture here and how Jesus dealt with this situation and how many today need to deal with your situation. In chapter 8 of John, verse 1 says, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives. And early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and he taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him, but Jesus stooped down, and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, I love this, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and he wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. Let's begin to look here. There was no doubt about the sin of this woman. There was no arguing. There was no finding innocence. She was guilty. The old saying, she was guilty as sin. She sure was. There was no doubt about it. They brought her. She had been already condemned by the men of the area, of the community, of the village. She was already doomed in their eyes, and they brought her before Jesus to get the confirmation from him to go ahead and bash her brains out. But Jesus had other plans. You know what? It reminds me a lot of times when people will come and they'll say, Pastor, this. Let me know, what do you think? What do you think? Sometimes I feel like I'm not certainly putting myself in Jesus' shoes, but you know what? I can imagine how he felt when they come and said, Listen, this is what we found, this is what we got, now we need you to make the decision. Here, what do you think? The word says this. This is what we got to do. But Jesus was standing there and he was listening as they brought her and they brought the evidence and they began to plead their case and their cause for bashing her brains out. You know, sometimes I just think about they had her condemned. They had her done for. And Jesus was listening, and they said that he stooped down on the ground and he began to draw or write in the dirt, in the sand. Can you sometimes ever imagine, well, maybe what he was writing? We went and saw a movie a little while back. And there was a scene in the movie, I can't remember the name of it. A young guy that come to